Hey guys, Will here. So today we're going to be checking out a range of USA-made sim racing products coming out of Minnesota from Turn Racing. So we've got a quick hub, we've got a spacer, we've got a couple of wheels to check out, a button plate, some stickers, and a USB cable. So today we're going to be putting all of this through its paces, doing some driving tests and seeing whether these are the right products for you. So let's get started. Okay, so a couple of important housekeeping things to cover while we get all this stuff unboxed. So firstly, a big thank you to Zach from Turn Racing for sending all of this stuff across to us to check out. Now, we've been chatting to him for the better part of a year now. He's been absolutely flat out trying to fulfill all the orders that he's had. So we've been sort of talking about doing this for a long time now. But yeah, look, the primary objective that he had in doing this review was obviously to show you guys, our audience, his products, but also he was very keen on just getting our feedback in general and, you know, finding out some ways that he might be able to improve his product. He's a very passionate guy, very genuine and very humble as well, very easy to deal with. And I'm sure any of you guys that have dealt with him would agree with that, but definitely let us know what your experiences have been like with Turn Racing in the comments as well. But I mean, straight away you can see really nice quality stuff here, but we'll get it all unboxed and we'll go through everything properly. Now, if you do like what you see here and you decide you want to pick one of these up for yourself, we do have some affiliate links down in the description below, direct to Turn Racing. So if you do want to support the channel, that is a great way of doing so at no additional cost to you guys. So we really do appreciate your support there. But as always, this is just about showing you the products, giving you our honest opinions on them, and figuring out whether they're the right things for you, because there are obviously a lot of different steering wheels on the market and a lot of unique features and benefits and bits and pieces that can make different products appeal to different people. So almost at the end here, we've got a whole bunch of stuff to go through today. Nice big chunky 6mm Allen key there, included with the quick hub as well. So that's going to be a useful tool to have for other things as well, I think. But yeah, okay, that is everything out on the desk. So let's go through everything that we have here, and then we'll have a look at each component in detail. So let's quickly run through the various products that we have here on the table. We'll flash up some pricing as we're talking about each thing too, and then we'll go through and look at each one of these components in more detail. So starting off, we have the quick hub, which is basically just a quick release mechanism for your wheelbase. So one side bolts to a 70mm stud pattern on the wheel side, and one side bolts to the base side, 70mm stud pattern on both. And then you've got a very simple Allen key style bolt in the bottom here, which undoes and they slide together. We'll look at it in detail a little bit later on. We'll probably hook that up to our VRS wheelbase, I think, to test that guy out, see whether there's any flex in there. And you'll notice as we go through this, all of these products are designed pretty much to be as high a quality as possible at as low a price as possible, without a lot of the bells and whistles that you might see in other products. And a very sort of classy and minimalistic design here that reduces the cost but doesn't reduce the overall quality. So we also have a 50mm spacer here as well. So if you need a little bit of extra distance between your wheel and your wheelbase. Now he does sell a range of different spacers between 10mm and 50mm depending on what you need. That is the 50mm. Then we also have a little USB extension cable here as well, where you can bolt that directly to the profile underneath your wheel deck, and then that allows you to plug in whatever wheel you have directly into this without having to run the cable all the way back to your PC. So that is definitely something that I'm going to be using on my daily driver rig, and that's available in a couple of different lengths as well. Then we've got the R320 or 320mm wheel. We've got the R305 or 305mm. Then we also have the button plate version 2, which you can see really slim profile there, a range of different buttons and toggles and bits and pieces on. Nice high quality magnetic shifters on that as well. And then we've also got a couple of stickers here, which are optional accessories for the various different wheels. So there's a range of different designs available. And again, you can refer to their website for the full range available there. And then we've just got our cables and bits and pieces and accessories that are included with our button plates. So that is all the bits and pieces that we're going to be taking a look at today. We'll start off with the accessories, then take a deeper dive into the wheels, look at build quality, ergonomics, take a look at the functionality of the button plate as well. We'll of course do some driving tests and then pull it all together with our conclusions at the end. So next up, let's take a quick look at the 50mm billet aluminium spacer. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the video, there are a range of different spacers available depending on your needs. So they're available from 10mm all the way up to 50mm like what we have here, and they range from $12 up to $37 US. And that might seem quite expensive for a block of metal, but I can tell you from working in the automotive industry, billet aluminium parts do cost a lot of money. Something like this for a real life car would probably cost a lot more than that. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Now it is constructed from 70-75 aluminium, black anodized of course. And you can see each flange is 5mm thick, and it actually thickens throughout the center here as well. So you can see, if you were to measure the thickness there, I don't have any way of actually measuring that for you guys, but it's a lot thicker between those two fingers there than the 5mm thickness there. So there's absolutely no flex in this whatsoever. We tested this out on our VRS Direct Force Pro, and yeah, there was no twist in there at all to speak of. So absolutely fine. If you need a 50mm spacer, this is definitely going to get the job done. And the thinner spacers are just a single piece, basically like this, with a thicker piece of metal, so they don't have the cutaway in the middle there. So 70mm stud pattern is obviously going to meet up with any 70mm stud patterned wheel. Now you might be wondering, why would you even want a spacer on your wheel? The reason for that is simply to make sure that you've got the same distance between your hands and your body for all the various different wheels that you're running on your rig. So you can imagine a button plate like this is quite thin. It doesn't have a whole lot of meat between the wheel and the wheelbase. Whereas if you look at something like the Fanatic Button Module Endurance, you can see that's a lot thicker. So for those who are wanting to keep that exact same distance between all of their wheels without the need to, you know, sort of make adjustments between cars, then spacers can get that job done. The other reason is, of course, depending again on the button plate that you have, you may need a spacer to give you a little bit of clearance between the cable connection and your wheelbase. So those are the kinds of things that you need to consider when you're putting this together on your rig. But I think that's pretty much all the detail you need for a billet aluminium anodized spacer. It does what it does, and yeah, it does it with absolutely no issues whatsoever for what I think is a reasonable price. So let's take a look at the Turn Quick Hub system. Now this is essentially a quick release mechanism that allows you to detach your wheel from the hub without the need to undo all of the individual bolts to detach the wheel itself. So the way this works is very, very simple. Basically, you've got your wheel side adapter, you've got your base side adapter. The base side will bolt to your wheel hub. The wheel side will then obviously bolt to your wheel. You slide the two halves together, and you can see, even without the bolt in the middle in place, there's no flex in there whatsoever. Now, obviously there will be some machining tolerances. This is billet aluminium CNC machined, so the tolerances there should be minimal, but then what happens is you've got a little M8 bolt, which goes in the center, screws into position, and then they also include a nice big T-wrench to secure that down. So you bolt it into place, secure it down, and there you go. You have your connection between the wheel and the wheel hub. So look, I'm happy with the system in terms of the build quality. And when we tested it out, there was no flex through the mechanism itself. So it is a flex-free design, which is great. But while it is very good quality, and I know that billet aluminium parts are very expensive, generally speaking, but for me, I think for the money, it really needs to have some sort of a latching mechanism that removes the need for having any sort of bolt or any sort of tools required to release the wheel at all. And the other concern that I do have, and obviously this isn't something that we can comment on without testing it for a very long period of time, you are using a steel bolt bolting into an aluminium thread. Aluminium threads are notorious for stripping out over time if you over tighten them, because it is a softer metal than the steel that you're using to bolt into it. And I have seen that happen on many a billet aluminium car part over the years, so definitely not something to be looked over. But just to give you a quick idea of some of the other options that are available on the market, I'm only going to talk about the ones that I've personally tested. I run the Hybrid Racing Simulation Zero Play Quick Release on my SimiCube 2 Ultimate, and that is an excellent system. Now, admittedly, it is a lot more expensive. This guy, you're looking at $57 for each half, and obviously you will need to buy the base half and the wheel half, so $114 US for the full system, looking at about 160 Australian dollars by comparison. Now, the Hybrid Racing Simulation Zero Play Quick Release, that is 275 Australian dollars for the full system, and then you're looking at $77 for the wheel side, should you want to add additional wheels on down the track. So it is obviously a very expensive system, but it does work very well. Then you've got something like the SimiCube Quick Release, or SQR, which comes in at 92 Australian dollars, so quite a bit cheaper than what we're looking at here. Now this also has absolutely no flex in it whatsoever, and I ran this on my SimiCube 2 Ultimate for a good 3 or 4 months before I switched across to the Zero Play. The only reason I made that switch was because I was really worried I was going to lose this retaining pin. So the way this system works is basically you've got the two halves, so this half is bolted to your wheelbase, and then this half is bolted to your wheel. They slot together, and you can see again, there's absolutely no play there, and then you've got a pin which goes through the middle, and that locks the two halves together. So you don't have any bolts or any tools required to separate the two halves, but I was constantly concerned that I'd end up losing this and then not be able to drive. So I switched across to the HRS Zero Play, and with how frequently I switch between wheels, I was very happy with that purchase. So look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this system. I just think it is a little bit expensive for what it offers when you consider some of the other options that exist out there. And there are a few other systems as well, which I haven't mentioned here simply because we haven't personally tested them. But yeah, if some sort of a latching mechanism, I think would be on the cards for something that costs this much money. And I think that would be a big improvement. But if you don't change between wheels all the time and you just want something that's really nice and solid, not too worried about having to get something out to change between your wheels, then this will do a good job. It's just not quite as convenient as some of the other options that are out there for your consideration. Now, a quick look at the USB extension as well. You can see on my one, the sticker is falling off. It is just a 3D printed bracket here, and obviously it's been sweating or doing something there that's caused the sticker to lift off, but it doesn't really matter. This is going to be hidden away on the rig anyway, but obviously I've got to show you what's happened. This has been sitting in a box on our shelf for about a month and a half now before we got around to the review, and that's what it looked like when we unboxed it. So we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this. It is literally just a 3 or 6 foot, depending on which one you buy, USB extension cable that slots into a 3D printed bracket here. And you can see it literally just slides in. And then you've got a couple of T-nuts on the back here. Now these are compatible with a range of different series profile from 10 up to 40 series. But if you are wanting to run this on a standard 40 series profile like what you'll find on most sim rigs, you probably want to end up using your own T-nuts simply because these are a little bit difficult to slot in without sort of having an open end. So they do work, but yeah, I would probably be using my own T-nuts there. But good that they do include something. And it literally just bolts on somewhere around your wheel, and that allows you to plug in the USB connection to your wheel underneath and have a nice convenient connection right there on your rig. Now, one thing that did disappoint me with this, and it's a bit of a catch-22 because there are positives and negatives to this, but you can see here the USB connection is recessed inside the assembly. So you can see there's a slight little divot in the cable which is supplied by Tern for their wheels. So if we slot that in, you can see it actually kind of pinches the cable there and it gives it a little bit more strength against being pulled out, which is a good thing. But what it also means is that it's not going to be compatible with some other USB cables that are out there. So this is a cable that comes with a Cube Controls wheel, for example. And if I spin that around and get the USB oriented correctly, you can see that's not going to go in without quite a bit of forcing there. And then what happens is that's going to wear down the plastic over time, and then this one's going to become loose. And if you had a device that had a wider plug than this one does, you might not be able to plug it in at all. So you may end up just wanting to shave down those sides ever so slightly to be able to plug any device that you want in. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't a universal one-size-fits-all thing that you could just plug any USB device into. But I can see why they've done it that way, to give you a little bit of extra strength for your plug. You can imagine if this is mounted on your rig, then the plug is just literally going to slide in there and be held in there quite securely and have a little bit more strength against getting pulled out. Although obviously if you yank on it, it is still going to come out. So yeah, it is what it is. Just letting you guys know. But I mean, ultimately something like this boils down to the cost of a USB extension cable. If you've already got a 3D printer and you can whack something like this together, then there's obviously no need to buy the one from Tern. It does come included with the button plate V2, of course. But for under $20 US, I can't see too many people complaining. So let's have a closer look at both of these wheels now. We've got the R305 or 305mm wheel and the R320 or 320mm wheel. So which one you're going to choose is purely just going to depend on what types of cars you're driving and your own personal preferences. It is quite a subjective thing. The smaller the diameter of the wheel that you're using, the more sensitive the car inputs tend to be. And it can also tend to, I guess, amplify the force feedback or make it feel a little bit stronger and a little bit sharper as well, the smaller you go on diameter. So 300mm or so is generally a pretty good versatile diameter for driving a wide variety of cars between Formula style and GT style. So you're going to be able to drive F1, GT3, GT4 and so forth with the 300mm, whereas 320mm more leaning towards your sort of GT3, GT4 style. Less likely to want to drive something like a Formula 1 car with a larger diameter. Really all it just comes down to is slightly less sensitive inputs and slightly more dampened force feedback, but there isn't a massive difference there in terms of what you feel through the wheel. It's mostly just down to the input sensitivity, meaning that the inputs are a little bit less twitchy with a larger diameter than they are with a smaller diameter. Now the R305 does actually have an overlay sticker stuck to it here, and there's a range of different stickers. They included a couple of different ones to give us a idea of what's available for the R320. But if you have a look on their website, there's a variety of different stickers, all kinds of different designs, from flashy colors through to this kind of forged carbon look, and a standard weave carbon fiber on this one as well. So full range available on the website. You can check that out for more details. They do look quite nice, but what I'm going to do now is just peel off the overlay which was pre-installed on the R305 that they sent us, because I want to show you the raw material underneath. I actually prefer the raw aluminium from my own personal preference, but let's just peel this off very carefully. And you can see a nice high quality sticker, no issues at all there with adhesion or anything peeling off or coming loose as we're driving. Just going to be very careful taking this off because I don't want to stretch it in case I do decide I want to put it back on again. And there we go. That is the beautiful brushed anodized aluminium sitting underneath. So you can see side by side now they do look very similar, but there are a couple of other little subtle differences there which we need to point out to you. So the R320 does have slightly thicker grip material, 1mm thicker, so 37.5mm thick on the R305 and 38.5mm thick on the R320. You'll also notice if we spin the wheels around, there is a 10mm dish on the R320, so you can see the mounting face sits 10mm lower than the actual face of the wheel where you're gripping onto it. So you can see if I lay it flat on the table there, it dips down a little bit in the middle, whereas if we have a look at the 305, that has absolutely no dish, so completely flat across the entire surface. Otherwise, they are pretty much identical in their construction. And of course, in terms of build quality and the materials used, they are absolutely identical to each other. So I'm gonna set the 305 aside for now. Let's have a closer look at the 320. So the first thing I noticed holding this in my hands, the grip material that they've used, this kind of rubber material feels really, really nice. Now they have made it a little bit softer than some of the previous revisions. So this is a Shaw 50A squish factor. And yeah, it has a really nice ergonomic design as well. So nice cutaways for your thumbs, your hands wrap around nicely, and I can imagine this is going to suit a wide variety of different hand sizes as well. I don't have the biggest hands in the world, got quite girly hands, and yeah, it's very comfortable for me, but the cutaways are big enough, the openings are large enough, and it's not going to be an issue for people with larger or smaller hands, I don't think. And they do say that this is a maintenance-free material as well, so obviously you will want to wipe it down occasionally to kind of just get grime and dirt off it, but you're not going to need to clean it with a brush or anything like what you have to do with suede, for example. Suede maintenance can be quite tricky, and it does tend to show quite heavy signs of wear and tear over time, regardless of whether you're using gloves or not. A lot of people just say, oh, wear gloves if you're using suede and you don't have a problem. But in my experience, at least, it does still wear down over time, although maybe not quite to the same extent. Now, this obviously won't be such a big deal for those who wear gloves, but if you do drive with bare hands, one thing that you're really going to appreciate about this material is that it is nice and smooth, and it doesn't have that sticky, tacky kind of feeling to it like some of the other rubberized materials that we've tested over the years. And just to give you a couple of quick examples, the Asher Racing Wheels recently moved across to using this kind of rubberized material as well. Now, this is the same rubberized material you do find in a lot of real life race cars. So it does have a good grip level to it. It's certainly not going to slip around in your hands. And it is quite comfortable to drive with bare hands or with gloves. So no complaints there. But one of the subjective downsides to this material is it does have a kind of tacky, sticky kind of feeling to it. And it does, particularly when your hands get sweaty, it does tend to feel a little bit gross. And as you can see, it does pick up a lot of dead skin, dirt and debris. It's a bit of a dust and debris magnet. So that isn't going to be a problem with this material. Now, Cube Controls actually did used to use a similar material, if not the exact same material as that. With their new F Pro, they actually moved across to using a similar material to what we see here. It doesn't have the same textured finish to it. It's a smooth finish, but it has a very similar kind of squish to it, similar kind of Shaw level. And it's that same kind of smooth, non-sticky material. So that was one of the things that we really liked about the F Pro, and something that I definitely appreciate about these turn wheels as well. So definitely no issues at all there in terms of build quality. And look, honestly, looking at both of these wheels, the wheel that I have experience with that comes to mind straight away is actually my Team 300 Momo wheel. Now, just the wheel rim itself on this wheel was 370 Australian dollars when I bought it off eBay. And I think it's even more expensive than that in a lot of retail stores. You can see it's got a very similar texture in the aluminium. The machining on the edges is very similar as well. And yeah, these turn wheels really do have a very Momo kind of quality and feel to them, which is really good to see. Now, in terms of price, which we haven't actually discussed yet, I gave you the price of the Momo Team 300 wheel. So the pricing of the R305 and the R320 is actually identical. So US dollars 147, euros is 139.36, and Australian dollars is 207.59. But just to give you another point of reference here price-wise, something like the Fanatic R300 rim, which is actually my favorite Fanatic rim, this comes in at about 250 Australian dollars, so about $40 more expensive than the turn wheels. And look, very similar in terms of build quality. You can see it's got a similar kind of brushed aluminium look, a little bit less shiny on the turn wheels if we compare that to what we have with the Fanatic wheel. Just feels a little bit cheaper in terms of build quality, and you can see just getting up on the little tiny details, the machining on the edge there has got, you can see the CNC markings there rather than a kind of brushed finish. Whereas if we get up on the edge of the turn rims, it's got the same kind of brushed aluminium look all the way through. Now these kinds of details obviously aren't going to make a difference to the driving experience. We'll talk about twist and flex and things like that when we get up and driving a little later on. But you know, those little details are the kinds of things that I look for, just little marks of quality like that. And it really is a beautifully machined piece of equipment with no kind of weaknesses or flaws anywhere in terms of the visual appearance. So yeah, really, really happy with the way they look. And I do think that they are fairly priced for what they are. Obviously you can buy a lot cheaper wheels on eBay, but you know, it is pretty fairly priced. If we compare across to something like the Fanatic flat rim, this is a little under 10 Australian dollars cheaper than the turn wheels. But to me, at least, it just doesn't have quite the same high quality appearance that the turn wheels have. I mean, these are really, really small details, but the turn wheels just do have a slight edge over the Fanatic rims for a similar price, I think. So just a little point of reference there for you guys. We figured we have the wheels here, we may as well compare them side by side so you can see exactly what you're getting for the money. Now, another thing you'll notice with the design across both wheels is they've made the spokes, or the areas here, here, and here, quite thin. So it will be interesting to see whether that does introduce any flex when we drive a little later on. But the reason for that is to make these compatible with as many different button plates as possible. So obviously they're going to be compatible with the turn button plate, and you can see there's a huge gap there, so plenty of space available, and that is obviously to make sure that the button plate is also compatible with a wide variety of rims. But just to give you one more example here, the button module Endurance from Fanatic is one that has a bit of a reputation for not being compatible with many different wheels, and you can see again here, if we line that up with the 70mm stud pattern, plenty of clearance there for all the buttons. And I think that's actually going to be a pretty popular choice there for those with Fanatic wheelbases that want to use the button module Endurance. There's plenty of room there for your thumbs to go through. But yeah, you can see that has a really nice classy look to it. The yellow actually matches as well quite nicely, which looks good. But yeah, they've obviously put a lot of effort and thought into trying to make this compatible with as many different button plates as possible. So that obviously gives people plenty of options. So let's take a closer look at the button plate V2 now. So we'll start off with what comes inside the box. We get a nice little sticker sheet there with a wide variety of different stickers in both yellow and white, and a couple of decorative stickers as well. So if you want to put a turn logo over the default logo on whatever wheel you end up pairing with this plate, then you can do that too. And they appear to be nice high quality stickers, same material as we saw with the overlays earlier. So no issues there. I don't think you're going to have any issues with wear and tear on these either, but that's of course something that we can let you guys know. Or if you do have one of these wheels or one of these button boxes, let us know in the comments down below how you've gone with that. But yeah, nice high quality stickers, don't see any issues there. We get a coiled USB-A to RJ45 connection. That is obviously connected to the wheel, and that goes into your PC or hub, or the extension as it were. So the extension is also included with the button plate too. So you can buy this as an optional accessory, but the 6-foot version of that is included. So as we saw before, you mount that to somewhere around your wheel deck, plug this into your hub or your PC, and then your wheel cable will plug into that. So this doesn't need to be long and cumbersome. It just basically is an interface between the plate and this guy. You also get included some 40mm flat-headed tapered screws. And if you get up nice and close on that, you can see it's got a thread on the bottom, and then it's got a stem there which doesn't have any thread on it. So the little threaded inserts on the button plate itself do have threads in them. So you screw it through to the part where there's no thread, and then obviously that gives you options in terms of the quick release that you're mounting on the back there. So if you've got some sort of a spacer like this, you would obviously chuck a nut on the back of that, or if you're bolting directly into a quick release that has threads on it, you've got the threads there too. So it's good to see they have the option of having a thread on here, so you can screw in from the front and screw in from the back if you need to. But because there's no thread on the middle of that screw there, it means you're not going to get any binding issues between the threads on the inserts and the screws themselves. So good that they include some specialized screws for that. Now, there are meant to be 6 M5 nylock nuts with a flange included too. They weren't in our box, so I can't show you that. We've obviously got the button plate itself. Now, there is an option to order this without the shifters as well. It comes in around about $100 US cheaper without the shifters if you don't need them. So say, for example, if you're mounting to something like a Fanatic podium hub and you already have their magnetic paddle modules, then you wouldn't need the shifters on the button plate. So that is the reason why that is an optional accessory. There are a couple of other scenarios where you might not want shifters as well. Now, if you do go for the option with shifters, by default, you'll get pre-installed some 5mm carbon fiber paddles, and those are good for wheels up to about a 320mm diameter. But then inside the box is also included a couple of anodized aluminium shifter paddles with a 10mm offset. So that allows you to go from 320mm up to about 350mm depending on the wheel. So great that they've thought of that and included that in the box as well, so you're not going to mount your wheel and then be like, oh, I can't shift gears. And nice to see that they are a nice high quality anodized aluminium. So depending on the wheel you have, pretty much every single base is covered there. And that is everything that's included. One thing I'm noticing straight away is just how light this feels. So let's go into more detail on exactly what you get with the button plate. So obviously, as you would have seen before, this does connect via USB to your PC via a little RJ45 connection on the back here. So we'll take a look at the software interface a little bit later on the PC. And you can see that does have a little bit of an offset there on the back of the panel. So you will just need to consider that if you're mounting to a surface which is slightly larger than the standard 70mm stud pattern. Obviously it is a 70mm stud pattern in terms of how it mounts, but yeah, you're gonna just need to make sure you have that little extra bit of clearance there. So a 10mm spacer is enough to take care of that if you're mounting to something like a VRS Direct Force Pro, for example, which has a larger mounting surface on the back of it. Now, the reason for that is quite simply because the button plate itself is only actually 70mm thick, so there isn't enough room physically to fit that connection and have it flush up against without that little bit of extrusion there. So that's the reason for that. So plastic construction in terms of the housing, it's a nice injection molded plastic there, and it does feel nice and solid as well. One of the things I was worried about being plastic is that it might kind of feel quite echoey and hollow, and we'll get a wheel mounted up to it in a minute and see how it feels overall. But you'll notice that these threaded inserts, which are responsible for mounting the wheel, are actually passed all the way through the entire enclosure. So in terms of your wheel actually bolting to the hub behind it, it's a metal to metal contact all the way through. So this plastic isn't going to introduce any flex in terms of the wheel interfacing with your hub behind it, provided that these aren't going to float around inside the plastic housing. And obviously flex is something that we'll test later on. But again, we can see that continued theme here of cutting costs where possible to get the cost for the end user down, but not compromising in terms of the overall build quality and fit and finish. And although it does have quite a minimalistic kind of look to it, it is a very nice high quality feel to it as well. So let's quickly run over the inputs now. We've got 6 tactile buttons, and those all have a really nice positive click to them. They feel nice and uniform throughout as well. That's one of the things I always check for. A couple of wheels we've tested in the past have had a few buttons that felt different from the others, but these all feel nice and uniform. So it's quite a shallow push, in some ways quite similar to the buttons on Cube Controls wheels, but it's got a little bit more of a positive click to it. It's a little bit more intentional than the Cube Controls buttons are, which I quite like. And if we compare it to something like the buttons on the Button Module Endurance, you can see these have got quite a lot of wiggle to them, so they move around and they feel quite cheap and quite hollow in comparison to the buttons on this guy. So definitely up there with some of the better feeling buttons that we've tested over the years here. And then we've got a couple of rotary encoders down the bottom here with push button function as well. And then we've got 2 funky switches, one on either side. So that gives you right, left, up, down, rotary encoder and push button on either side. Really, that just gives you a whole lot more versatility when it comes to navigating through menus and various different functions within your car as well. Now, that was one of the things that I actually opted for when I designed my SimCore button mount. This has the ability to choose between rotary encoders or 7-way funky switches, and I actually went for 7-way funky switches on both sides for that exact reason. So great to see them here. So the rotary encoders have nice, clearly defined detents on them as well. They're not too stiff. You're not going to really sort of be jamming it around to try and get it to move. It's got a little bit of a click there as well, not too loud, which is good. But yeah, I don't think you're gonna have any problems operating those with gloves or no gloves, but again, we'll comment on that when we're driving in just a minute. Nice positive click there too. And same deal with our funky switches. Good quality detents there. They don't just sort of slop around. And there's a little bit of movement there before they activate in each direction. But again, it has a nice amount of resistance there. It doesn't feel floppy, doesn't feel loose or anything like that. So yeah, no problems at all with the inputs. So taking a look at the shifters now, you'll notice that they're bolted in through some aluminium inserts once again. So similar to what we had with the wheel face here, it's not a plastic interface there, so it gives it a little bit of added rigidity. And you can see on the tail end there, that insert sits all the way through. So we've got billet aluminium anodized cages, so the outer part here, and then the arms on the shifter themselves, and then the 5mm thick carbon fiber paddles suitable for up to 320mm wheels, and then the 3mm thick billet aluminium anodized 10mm offset paddles, which are for wheels from 320 to 350mm. And having a look on the back here, you can see a 20mm long slot there that allows you to move the shifters in and out. You can actually see on the aluminium versions, there's little markings there too, so you can measure them to be exact on both sides without the need for any other measuring implement. And there's a little groove cut out in that arm as well, which allows the paddle to sit in there nice and snug without moving around. There's a little tiny bit of wiggle in it. That is just the armature itself moving around inside the cage, with just that little carrier sitting through the center there. But it's certainly not excessive, certainly not anything that I think is going to bother anybody. And a nice positive click on there as well. One thing I will mention, it is a Torx headed bolt there to adjust those in and out. They didn't include a little Torx wrench in the box, so that is something that you will need to adjust those shifters. It would be good to see them include that. Not a big deal, but something that I thought was worth mentioning. But yeah, nice positive click on both sides. We'll talk about that more when we go for a drive in just a minute. You can see the little neodymium magnets sitting in the back there, so that gives it that nice on-off switch kind of feeling rather than something that's gradual. There's no spring-loaded mechanism in there or anything like that. It's all just purely the magnetic force. And then if we have a really close look in the side there, you'll also be able to see the little micro switches. So they are little micro switches rather than Hall effect sensors as we see in some other brands. So in terms of construction, build quality, materials, all those things, look, I mean, it isn't at the same standard as something like an Asher Racing or a Simcore button box, for example. I mean, if you look at the Simcore one, for example, this is carbon fiber throughout the entire front face, all billet aluminium in the back and everything. And I mean, it's a much higher quality build, but it also costs a hell of a lot more than something like this does. So 350 US dollars, euros, or 500 Australian dollars is still a lot of money to be spending on something like this. So, you know, we do have to hold it to a standard. But I guess in summary, in terms of build quality here, I would say that the quality that we have represents the step down in price over what we have for something like a Simcore or Asher Racing. And yeah, all the important fundamentals are there in terms of the quality of the switches. And we'll comment on rigidity when we go for a drive a little bit later on. So just quickly, before we get a wheel mounted and move into our driving test, quick word on compatibility. There is an extensive list of compatible wheels listed on their website, so we'll drop a link down in the description below for that. Just to give you a quick idea, Fanatic wheels, which tend to be quite difficult in terms of compatibility just because they have a wide kind of area here, the spokes are quite thick. You can see if I hold that up on the button plate, we'll get it lined up. There we go, about there. Plenty of room there, no issues at all. And if it fits that wheel, it's gonna fit most wheels. But yeah, best thing to do there is just check the website to make sure this is gonna be compatible with the wheel that you're intending on mounting. So let's get a wheel mounted up on this now. I think we'll start with the 305 and get in and do some driving tests. So we've got the R305 wheel mounted up on our button plate V2. Now I've got it mounted on a Hybrid Racing Simulation 0-play quick release system at the moment. That is the quick release that I run on my SimuCube 2 Ultimate, which is what we're going to be using for the bulk of our driving tests here. Now you remember earlier in the video, we did take a quick look at the Turn Quick Hub. We did test that out with our VRS Direct Force Pro wheelbase. Happy to report that there wasn't any flex in that system either. So yeah, happy with the results there. We also did test out the 50mm Spacer 2 and that didn't have any flex either. So I was happy with the performance of both of those and we'll reflect back on those in the conclusions part of the video, but I just wanted to give them a quick mention now. So you'll notice we didn't actually end up having to use any spacer with this particular quick release. You can see it sat in there nicely behind that little notch, but obviously that will depend on the quick release system that you're using. But if you do have an HRS one, then that will work without the need for any spacers, which is great. So let's get this installed on the rig now and then get into some driving tests. So I spent plenty of time driving with the R305 and the R320. Absolutely no issues or no surprises with either of them. There's minimal flex within the rim itself. And yeah, just absolutely no issues to speak of whatsoever there. Really happy with the build quality, really love the nice squishy rubberized material as well. Didn't seem to be a magnet for dirt and debris. Didn't feel gross if I got sweaty hands, felt perfectly fine with gloves as well. The open tops on the wheels make it nice and easy to see dashes, and just overall really, really happy with the quality. I'd say they're every bit as good as my Momo Team 300 wheel, which I use quite regularly. And while there are, of course, cheaper alternatives available, I think these hit a good price point for the level of quality that you're getting. So no other surprises with the wheel rims at all. And I do really like the fact that these are compatible with such a wide variety of different button boxes as well. Now, speaking of button boxes, we did test out the button plate V2 quite extensively as well. And obviously, button placement ergonomics is going to depend entirely on the rim that you're using with it. I used it with the 305 and the 320, and I found the button placement to be nice and convenient with all the rims that I tested it with. The wider you go with the rim, the more you have to kind of roll your hands around to reach the buttons in the center, but that's going to be the case with any button box. So it's just purely a matter of considering what kind of wheel you're going to be using and whether or not the button placement for this particular one is going to be suitable. But nice size cutouts there as well to accommodate for a wide variety of different rims. Again, check their website for a list of more commonly used rims which are compatible with this particular button box. But no issues in terms of the build quality. Obviously they have used plastic throughout the construction combined with aluminium to make sure that there is enough rigidity and strength in the areas that need it. And I'm very happy to say that there were no issues with flex at all once we had it mounted up on the Simucube and the VRS Direct Force Pro, both using the turn adapters and other aftermarket adapters. The buttons have a really nice positive feel to them. The detents are nicely defined as well, so you can feel them whether you're wearing gloves or using bare hands. So overall, very happy with the button plate V2. Would be nice to see a version of this available too, which maybe had some analog paddles and maybe some additional functionality, LED strips, or maybe readouts for telemetry, things like that. It is very plain in this design, but it does what it does exceptionally well. And again, I think for the price point compared to a lot of other button boxes that are available on the market, it does a very, very good job. So that is pretty much everything when it comes to the wheels and button boxes. A lot of it is just ultimately down to subjective choice, but I think they do what they set out to do very well. And yeah, absolutely no issues there to speak of whatsoever. Now, when it comes to the other bits and pieces, the USB extension, look, I mean, it is what it is. It's a USB extension cable at the end of the day. It's got a 3D printed adapter on the end of it to mount it to your rig. The sticker did fall off it, and you know, it is a little bit tricky to plug in, if not impossible to plug in some other USB connections that are a little bit thicker than what comes with the button plate V2. But I mean, look, it does what it does. At the end of the day, it's under $20 US, so you can't really complain about it. If you already have a 3D printer and you know how to knock something up like this, then there's probably not a whole lot of point in buying it. But for me, honestly, for 20 bucks, I'd probably rather buy something like this than spend an hour, you know, trying to design something myself. So I think it does what it does well. And yeah, it is what it is. It's at the end of the day, it's a USB extension cable. So there's not really a whole lot more to be said. Now onto the spacer, no issues with flex there either. We tested that out on our VRS Direct Force Pro with the wheel configuration as you see here. And yeah, no twist, no flex, no nothing. Very, very solid and does what it needs to do very well. And of course, there is a range of different sizes available between 10 mil and 50 mil, depending on what you need. So just make sure you get in touch with Zach and figure out whether you are going to need a spacer for your particular configuration. We didn't end up needing one to mount this on our zero play quick release, but for others, you may well need to do so. And again, there's too many different configuration options really for us to be able to comment on every single one of them. So just check with Zach and he should be able to help you out there. So yeah, no issues at all with those. And then the quick hub, look, I mean, the quality is great. There's absolutely no issues with it. Again, absolutely no flex to speak of whatsoever. But I just think for the price, I would like to see some sort of a quick release mechanism here rather than a bolt. I mean, other options that are on the market which are similar quality to this are a lot more expensive, admittedly. But look, my honest opinion, and it is just my opinion based on my own experience, if you are changing your rims quite frequently, then you probably are going to find this frustrating. If you only change your rims once in a blue moon, then this is going to do the job perfectly fine. And it is a lot more convenient than having to undo all 6 of the bolts around the face of the wheel and pull everything apart every time you want to change between wheels. But I guess what I would say is definitely consider the other options that are available in the market when it comes to quick releases before just rushing in and buying this just because you're buying other stuff from Turn. For me personally, I'd rather pay the extra and get something like the zero play quick release. But again, if this is what falls within your budget and you're not changing wheels often, then it will absolutely do a good job. I just think that there's better options available if you can afford to spend a little bit more. And that pretty much summarizes everything, guys. So I hope you found the video interesting. Again, if you want to pick up any of the stuff that you have seen in today's video, there are some links down in the description below which help out the channel. So thank you very much for your support there. And thanks once again to Zach for sending these across to us to check out. So I hope you found today's video useful. If you have, please do leave a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel as well so you don't miss future videos like this one. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.